Hello, and welcome to another episode of The End of the Search. This one I call it, The Mind is Not Reliable and Inconsistent. Don't believe in it. Well, it's very simple because if you look at life, if you look at your life is always peaceful. Yes, I know you may think, wait a minute. What do you mean always peaceful? I have all these challenges and all the things that happens and appear. Once again, life, the underlying, the background, the substratum, life itself, it's always peaceful. The space is always peaceful. What may seem to occur in the space may seem to be moving and may appear chaotic, but the space is always peaceful. Well, you as life is always peaceful. But when you overlook the fact that you are alive, then it seemed as if the peace is gone, meaning as if life is gone. But what is it that is overlooking life? What is it that is overlooking what is always peaceful? A thought, the mind. See, the mind itself is a thought, and yet you simply are. Whenever you listen to the mind, you have to remember that the mind is always inconsistent, because it tells you one thing a moment, and then he tells you another thing in the other moment. But if you believe the mind, meaning if you believe the thoughts, you still are that piece that is underneath, but has been overlooked by the thought. Not listening to the mind does not mean that thoughts are not going to appear. I didn't say don't think, I say don't believe the content of the mind. Yes, and I've said this many times, and I'll keep reiterating. These videos are paradoxical because we are a thought in that which is, we as persons, as individuals, consequently, we are not going to choose to do A or B. A or B is chosen through us. So it's a paradox. At the same time that it appears as if I'm the one making the choices, I'm the one capable of not believing the thought, at the same time, life is the one that decides if this character is going to believe or not the thoughts. So, act as if you can actually have the choice of not believing the thoughts, while simultaneously you know that that is not a choice that you make, it's a choice that is made through you. This is a paradox we're going to have to learn to live with. Okay? So, from the moment I wake up in the morning, or waking up in the morning happens, then life is unfolding and is peaceful. The mind begins to interpret, the thoughts begin to come up, and that's where the peace seems to be overlooked. You see? And we're pointing here to the peace that we are by not believing the content of the mind, because the mind is always inconsistent and it's never coherent. It's just thoughts that appears. Now, the question that could arise is, but then, if I have to figure things out, if I have to make decisions, if I have to analyze something, shouldn't I go to the mind for that? It's much simpler than that. It's much simpler than that. That is not something that you do. That is what happens. So, if it's a requirement that in a particular task I analyze or whatever, the analyzing happens. It's not that I sit down to go to the mind and analyze. It's just there's an observing of the analyzing happenings, even though if it appears as if I am sitting analyzing. You see? Right now it appears as if though I am here making a video, And while I'm making the video, if you can hear, there's construction downstairs. I say like it's downstairs, so maybe you can hear the drilling right now. But I don't think should be an issue here. So right now, I notice how words, are being expressed through me, and it appears as if I am analyzing, and if I am actually choosing the words, as if I am putting it all together. But in reality, this is just what happens. It's just a happening that has nothing to do with me. You see? So life continues to unfold. A video is being made. A drill seems to be, I keep sound like that because it sounds as if it comes from upstairs, but I know that the construction is downstairs. Life happens. And the mind could judge this experience. Man, I'm making a video. I should not be listening to that. This is disrupting that. No, it's not disrupting anything. It's just what happens. Now, it seemed as if the one making the decision to continue making the video in spite of the drilling sound, as opposed to stop, wait for the drilling sound to stop and then continue. It appears as if though I am choosing to continue the video, and yet I know that this is what's happening and that is how life is unfolding through me. So going back to the question, how do I function? Do I analyze? It's very simple. The mind is only used to execute, not to give advice. You see? So in each moment, you notice how life unfolding through you, and you're resting in that peace that surpasses all understanding, because life is peaceful and you are life. It's only when you believe you're that separate character, and that is a thought that suggests you're a separate character, that it seems as if all of a sudden you cannot experience the peace that we're pointing to, which is what you are. That's what I said. You are life. You're not the thought that suggests that you are what you think you are. You see? So mind, thought is very inconsistent. It tells you one thing in one moment, tells you another one another moment. It keeps changing its mind. It's not consistent. It's not coherent. But you are not the mind and you're not the thoughts. You simply are. And notice how simple life is. We hear so much about the fear of uncertainty. But you see, Krishnamurti says something that I love. He says, the fear of the unknown, which would be uncertainty, but the fear of the unknown is not fear of the unknown per se, is fear of the known that is about to end. Because we're always living in the unknown. I don't know what is the next thought I'm going to have. I don't know what is the next word I'm going to say. I don't know what is the next thing is going to happen. It's always an unknown. But I somehow make myself believe that I do know by believing the thought that suggests, okay, I'm in control. I know what I need to do. I got to be prepared, You hear this a lot, there's a possible hurricane, so you have to go ahead and buy all this stuff. And then you buy all this kinds of stuff because the mind is, freaking out, and you're believing all the thoughts the mind says because you got to be prepared. And then the hurricane was a very minor thing or nothing major happened. And now you're stuck with all this food in there in the pantry, and most of it is probably going to go bad because you stuck yourself with stuff that you didn't even need. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with stocking if you find yourself in a situation where a hurricane could happen. What I am saying is that if stocking needs to happen, you notice how very organically, without any fear and panic, you find yourself buying what you need for that. I remember during the pandemic, they make this big issue about toilet paper, and there's going to be out of toilet paper, and people, my God, you go to the supermarket and buy the whole thing of toilet papers, and there was a joke that says, we found out why so many people buy so much toilet paper, because every time somebody sneeze, 1,000 people poop, so, but again, it's just the mind. But right now, all there is what is. And the thoughts can appear. But you know the fact that you are, and these videos are pointing to that, to the fact that you are. You see, that's why we don't get so much caught up into this, the details of the details that the mind or thoughts wants to go ahead and make an issue of. You see. So from the moment we wake up in the morning, the mind is being used just only to execute. I mean, you feel hungry. Did you choose to feel hungry? No, you felt hungry. And then you see how the mind says, hey, I'd like to make myself a toast or eggs or oatmeal or something. And you find yourself doing that. But you see, you're not listening to the mind that said, you should eat this or you shouldn't eat that because this means that whatever. No, I know nothing. All I know is that if I rest in the peace that I am, I just notice how life is unfolding, which is going to unfold anyway. Because it's unfolding anyway. But the mind suggests that it's not unfolding anyway. The mind suggests that it's unfolding according to your plans. That's why somebody says, you want to make God laugh? Oh, tell God your plans. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with simply being prepared. Sometimes it appears that that's necessary, but it's seen in a different way. I know that I'm not prepared because of the seeming danger of whatever. I find myself that if preparing needs to be happening, I'll find myself being prepared, but not attached to any particular outcome to this preparedness. It's just simply observing, hey, life wants me to buy more food today because they said there's going to be a hurricane in a week. Assuming that I cannot leave the town. You know? But in the end, life is unfolding, and if you don't believe the content of the mind, it's not that you're at peace, it's that you're experiencing that peace that you are, that you have been and will always be no matter what. So you see, you don't have to find inner peace. You don't have to go for inner peace. You don't have to choose inner peace. You are the inner peace because you are life, and life is peaceful. Life has no worries. The space is not concerned at all with what happens with the items that seems to appear in it, because the space knows that it is space. A movie screen, let's say, assuming that it had a brain and it knew that it's a movie screen, the moment it knows it's a movie screen, it doesn't care what movie you play or you project onto it, because whether it's a comedy or it's a drama or it's action or it's a horror or whatever the case may be, it cannot affect the screen. The only thing that would seems to have an effect, a psychological effect on the screen, if it's the screen having that little brain, and the brain tells it, watch out, that movie is going to hurt you. Only then the screen may seem to have the psychological suffering. Well, we are that screen, but we seem to have this seeming brain that suggests that we are not the screen, that we are part of the movie, and that's when we get caught. See what the problem is? And yet the invitation here is to just know that you are. Right now you cannot not be. Try not to be. Come on, give it a shot. Try not to be. Try to tell me I am not. And you realize that you cannot say anything otherwise than I am. Well, if that I am, you don't believe the thought, you don't believe the mind, which is inconsistent and unreliable. If you don't believe that, that I am remains as I am, as I've always been, in peace, happy. You see, while the thought that suggests that I am a something or a someone tries to gain protagonism. And now you rest in this. Yeah, but I mean, I would like to make money to do, that's a thought. Yeah, but the body, it may feel this way and I need to do, that's a thought. Everything other than what is a thought. The what is without the thought is peace, is happiness, is joy. This is where this is pointing to. You are happy, you are joy, you are love, you are peace right now, unless you believe the content of the mind, which suggests, first of all, that you are that seeming individual. That's when the problem comes in. You see, this is so obvious, but the fear is to let go of the identity. You see, Yeah, I want the same identity, but more peaceful. But you see, the identity is the obstacle to the fact that you are, and what you are has no identity. It simply is. And even though it plays as if you're this character, you still are. You still that peace that surpasses all understanding. The only difference, if you don't believe the content of the mind, you still act as if you're an identity, while simultaneously you know that you are not an identity. You play roles, but you don't believe any of them. And consequently, the mind can say everything it wants. Look what could happen to you. Look what's going to happen here. This is what you need to do. You got to prepare, and you watch that as thoughts, because you are the space in which all the thoughts seems to appear and disappear. And simultaneously, like I said before, you also know how life is moving you to do or not to do. Consequently, there's no issue about being prepared or not. If I need to be prepared, that's going to be part of the play, but it's going to be seen not as something that I have to control out of fear, but as part of the functionality of what is required in the moment. Just that simple. The mind believes in preparing for fear of the future. Here, preparing would not be for fear of the future. It's just simply part of the functionality of this play. If in the play I'm supposed to go to a trip in 2 weeks or something like that, it may seem as though preparedness is appropriate. You know, what kind of clothes am I going to buy, or am I going to take with me to make sure that I don't find myself in a place that I'm unprepared, so to speak. I'm going to tell you a story, you know. When I was a stand-up comedian, I did stand-up comedy for over 15 years. And I remember that one of my first trips, when I was really in a long trip, I was in Florida. I was living in Florida. And I had to go to do a show in Buffalo, New York. It was Buffalo, New York. And so it was in winter time, but I'm in Florida. Come on, Florida is sunny all the time. You know, it's warm. So I go ahead and I was prepared. I had the winter clothing, you know, but what I didn't know, that was my ignorance, and I learned that lesson really fast. What I didn't know is that I would take for granted that every time the airplane parks at the airport, you know, then you have this kind of like suction thing, you know, call it this tube in which you go from the airplane to the airport. So there's not a problem. So I go with my shorts, t-shirt and everything, because I figure, okay, I get to the airport. Once I get there, then in the airport, I am going to change to winter clothing. Piece of cake, no big deal. Well, that's not the way it happened. The airplane parks, but you have to get off the plane in the middle of winter, snowing, and walk to the airport. You know, I was completely frozen, okay? So I learned that lesson well. So you know what I did in my way back? I was very well protected. You know, I had all my winter clothes and everything. And when I arrived in Florida, I was sweating like you would not believe. But I said, I'm not going to be unprepared this time, just in case, out of the blue, a snowstorm happens in Miami, which is not going to happen, but you know. Well, long story short, well, again, you know, but that was just part of maybe that had to happen that way so I can tell the story right now. It's no big deal. And that happened in 1989 or something, 1990 or so many, many years ago. But interestingly enough, as I look at life, and you're resting in the beingness that I am, just notice that if there's something that is important that you need to know. I've always said that people say you should watch the news, you should be informed. If there's something I need to know, I will know. And that's have happened to me over and over and over again. Being informed is believing the mind, is believing the content of the mind, is believing all the junk that the mind wants to throw, so you keep still believing you're that separate entity. You see? When you know the fact that you are Again, life is simple, life is peace, and then just watch how it goes. And some may say, but what if you're in a country where there's going to be a lot of wars or whatever? You know what I found out? That if you're not supposed to be there, you're going to have an intuition that says fly out of that country. As simple as that. You don't have to know, you just simply know. Life is just simply playing itself out, and you are life itself. That's why it says that life takes care of life. When you forget the fact that you are life, then it seems as though you're suffering your experience. And this is why when you're sleeping and you're dreaming, the only issue if you're suffering is because you're believing the dream. It's not the content of the dream. Well, if you're suffering, it's not because of your experience, it's because of the content of the mind that you're believing in. And all we're doing here is reminding that we are, I am. And when all that is dropped, all that remains is what have always been, which is the fact that I am. And the I am without the believing the content of the mind is peace. The I am believing the content of the mind, it's still peace, but it's not recognized and therefore is experienced as suffering. But the peace that you are will remain always, no matter what, by the nature of your being, and you are being. Right now, you cannot not be. And the only obstacle, I said the only single one obstacle to that is believing any thought that crosses the mind. This is why this is simple. I didn't say that it's easy because there's so much conditioning, so much attachment to the belief that I'm this individual. But if you're willing to open yourself up and drop this idea that you're that individual, then yes, you have access immediately to the peace that you are, and that's how you live happy or happily ever after. But there's no after, in the same way that there's no before. All that there is what is. And if you rest in the what is by not believing the content of the mind, that's the happiness, that's the peace, that's the joy, that's the love that he's been searched for eons, for years, for millennia, through believing the content of the mind. And all we had to do, so to speak, if you want to use that word, is go back and rest in beingness. So the mind is no longer an obstacle, and you can watch the play unfold with a smile in your face, because now you know who you are. Well, this is inspiration that came through. I hope it served. And as always, may peace permeate the mind so that love can become evident.